get to revise this question. It's number 4 from May-June 2019, variant 2.3. We are still on 9608. So we are being told that a program is being written to process student information. One task involves inputting the names of all students in a class. So the first attempt of the pseudocode for this task is as follows. So went on to declare name 1 up to name 40. Then we went on to display a prompt like output the name of the student 1 until we get to student number 40, and after that we're just going to be inputting the name. So this would constitute of how many lines? That's 2 for each times 40, that's about 80. 80 plus 40 for the declarations, which makes 120 lines of code, only to input 40 names of students. Wow. So we're being asked now to rewrite the pseudocode to perform this task in a more efficient way, of course. It gotta be efficient. In a more efficient way to allow for the class of 40 students, right? Then we're being asked again to give the advantage of using the solution that I would have proposed, yeah? So I took the liberty of taking this on the blackboard. So what we need to do basically is to appreciate that the declarations that are being done here, we want to store these names. That's why we're actually putting in the what? We're putting in the declarations for these variable names. So we want to store. This means that we want to store the names that you're going to be getting, right? Then we were giving a prompt and then asking the student to give us the name, to give us the input, and we store it on an appropriate position based on what we would have declared here. Is that making sense? Beautiful. So we are now saying what we just need to do is to make sure that we create an array. Remember what you talked about when you talked about arrays? A structure is a structure that allows information to be stored, right? Multiple information to be stored. So the information that is going to be stored is going to be multiple now. Multiple data elements or multiple information to be stored, but that are supposed to be of the same data type. Of the same data type, right? Mm-hmm. So for this reason now, we're just going to be going ahead to create an array that is called names. That's going to be containing all these names. And it's going to be containing names from 1 to 40. So I'm going to be just going ahead to declare an array that is called names, like this, and we want to indicate that that's an array that's going to be having a lower bound of 1 to 40. Then we need to indicate that this is going to be coming through, that it's going to be containing strings only. So from there now, we need to go ahead now and run a for loop. A for loop needs to be running from 1 to 40. So we need now a variable that's going to be keeping track of how many times we are now in our loop. And we can choose a couple of variables. We can choose count, we can use index, we can use counter, but let's just stick to index for the meantime. I hope that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So we're saying now we're going to be declaring now index as what? Is an integer, like so. Right? The next thing that's going to be happening now is the part that we're going to be running now our for loop. So for index, starting now from value of 1 up until we get to what? 40, we need to go ahead and put in the prompt as is. The prompt is saying what? Output. What are we outputting? We are saying that input the name for student, yeah? The name for student. Then we go ahead and have the part for student. Let me just cut that up like that. For student, then we need to put in 1. So for 1 now, we're going to be taking the variable index now. So we'll put in index like this so that we can actually be able to present the prompt itself. And when we have put index outside of the quotes, we are saying that give us the value that is stored in index currently. So this is going to be 1 through 40. For the first one, for the first iteration, this is going to be holding 1. Second iteration, this is going to be holding 2. Because we just wrote it outside of the quotes, meaning to say that we want the value that is stored in index. Is it making sense? Mm-hmm. Then from that, now we now need to go ahead and actually input now. So when we say input now, we are supposed to be inputting on the right position in names. So we can just go ahead and say input and store in names position of index, like this. So this is going to be coming through to input and store it position number 1 for the first iteration, second iteration position of 2, third iteration position of 4 until we get to 4a. Right? Then this is a for loop. We don't need to increment no index. Right? So we don't say index is now equal to index plus 1. But what we do is we just go ahead and say next index. If you just say next, it's still okay. And even if you say next index, it's still okay. Right? Mm-hmm. So if we have it like this now, this will be our solution now to go ahead and input all the 40 names of the students. So the for loop is just one of the loops that you could use. It is the best. Why? Because for loop is best when we know the number of iterations, right? For we know the number of what? If we know the number of iterations, it's best for us to use the for loop, yeah. But nevertheless, you could have actually also used the repeat until. The repeat until, you could have also used the while loop. So this is your task now to go ahead and try to use the repeat until and the while loop to solve this similar task. I just had to use the one that is close to home since we already know the number of iterations that we're supposed to be using. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
That's probably marks the solution to this type of a question. Feel free to touch base if there is anything that you need clarity on.